Edexcel 2019, paper 1, of course the microeconomics paper. Let's get right on with it and get started with this section A. So going straight to the question, first one is a 2-mark question. With reference to the data provided, calculate the price elasticity of supply, so the PES, for new house builds between 2016 and 2017. You're advised to show your workings. What does it say in the stem? Between 2016 and 2017, the average price of new builds in the UK rose by estimated 5.4%. So the price rose from 5.4%. So of course, let's get started with PES. So what is the formula for PES? Of course, it's percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. So first things first, let's work out the percentage change in quantity supplied. So of course, if we look from 2016 to 2017, the quantity supplied has increased from 162,000 to 134,000. So how would we work this out? Of course, first thing first, let's just take 162,880, take that away from 134,612. And that would give us 28,268. So what we're going to do with this 28,268, so this is the change between 2017 and 2018. Now, of course, we need to divide that by the original to work out the percentage change, which, of course, what is the original? It is obviously 2016. So divide that by 134,612. That's going to give us 0.2, so I'm going to round that up to, as a percentage change, so that's 20.9%. So I'm going to round that up to, so we'll write like this, times 100, so 21%. I'm going to round that up to. So now we need to work out what is the last thing we need to work out. We need to work out the percentage change in price, which of course is actually given. It's given here. So 5.4% prices, house prices rose. So the last step is we do 21, which is the percentage change in quantity supplied, and we divide it by 5.4%, which should give us somewhere around the number 4, I believe. Yes, that gives us 3.88, which I'm going to round up to 3.89, which would be our PES, and that is how to get 2 marks on this question. So let's keep going, and it's a multiple choice question now. So a 2.5% increase in the new build house prices in one region of the UK suggests a 10% increase in the number of houses built. Ceteris paribus, this suggests the supply of houses. Assuming ceteris paribus, this suggests the supply of houses is what? So let's see what's happening here. The prices of houses have increased, therefore the supply of houses have increased. What does that suggest in terms of supply? Of course, that suggests what? It suggests elastic supply. And why is that? Since why would suppliers start supplying more higher prices? As of course they have a profit incentive. Therefore, if prices increase, that means supply will increase, which is classic. It means suppliers are responsive to an increase in price. Therefore, we would say this is relatively elastic supply. If prices increase 2.5% and supply only increase like 0.1%, then that would represent inelastic supply. Why is that? Since producers are not responsive to increases in price. Yeah, the answer there would be C. All the rest of them are wrong. Why is it not? It's obviously not perfectly elastic or perfectly inelastic, and we've already ruled out inelastic. Therefore, let's keep going in this question. So another 2-marker, and it's an explain here. Explain one factor that is likely to determine the price elasticity of supply of new house builds. And this is why your early units, these are pretty much, these are things you pretty much learn in the first few lessons of your economics. But like here, this is the real A-level paper where you are being assessed on essentially the factors which affect price elasticity of supply. So of course, if you think about new house builds, what do we build houses with? Raw materials. So my answer here would be availability of raw materials. And why is that? And remember, this is an explains question, so why is that? As that is, of course, if there's a lack of bricks, it means how is it going to affect the supply? It's going to mean the supply is inelastic. Why is that? As even if the prices are increasing of houses, it means that if there's a lack of supply of bricks, it means builders literally cannot build houses. Therefore, there will not be a responsive increase in quantity supplied, even though prices are increasing. Yeah, so this is basically written availability of raw materials, e.g. bricks, as if shortage of bricks, even if the price of houses increase, quantity supplied will not increase proportionally, as the main constraint will be the bricks, thus suggesting inelastic supply. That is how to get 5 out of 5 marks on that question 1. And let's keep going to this question 2. So it looks like we have a diagram question here. We love a diagram question. The reason why I love it, you can do it very quickly and very easy marks. So draw a supply and demand diagram to show the microeconomic effects of a hurricane on the US oil market. So hurricane is probably going to destroy the supply, so therefore I'm suggesting probably a decrease in supply. And what does it say? In 2017, Hurricane Harvey caused closure, so closure, so therefore it's going to affect supply of nearly a quarter of the oil production in the United States. This is, of course, a very simple question, so let's make sure we don't drop any stupid marks. So price and quantity on our axis, supply, so supply, shifting to supply plus 1, supply plus 1, or you can put supply plus hurricane, whatever you want to name it. Then we have our demand curve, of course, demand. Main thing to remember, label up the two equilibriums. So this is, of course, the first equilibrium, we have Q1, we have price P1, and then the second equilibrium, we have Q2, and now P2, and just represent what's going to happen. So, of course, when there's a reduction in supply, it means quantity will decrease, and price will also be increase from P1 to P2. That is literally, as that you can get 4 marks here in pretty much 20 seconds. This is why these questions are so good, and if you get a diagram question, you should be quite happy that you can save so much time and then use that later on in the paper. Now let's keep it moving. So we have a multiple choice question here. It looks like it's PPF question. So the diagram show movements from the position X to Y on the PPF. In which one of the diagrams does the movement from X to Y illustrate the most likely impact on the US economy of a natural disaster of I can't speak. And let's keep going and finish off this question too. So we have a 1 mark question, a multiple choice question to finish this off. So the diagrams show movements, and it looks like we have a few PPF diagrams here. So the diagrams show movements from position X to Y on a production possibility frontier. In which one of the diagrams does the movement from X to Y illustrate the most likely impact on the US economy of a natural disaster such as Hurricane Harvey? So essentially, how is Hurricane Harvey going to affect a PPF? And very simply, of course, it's going to reduce the maximum production potential of an economy. So what we're looking for, we're looking from a shift in from, like it says, from point X to point Y. Straight away we can rule out B, Y, since of course the production potential of the economy is increasing, and if we've just been hit by a natural disaster, that is of course not what's going to be happening. Here from X to Y, we're just moving along our curve, nothing's really changing, we're just changing them up, we're reallocating our resources, you could say. So yep, it would not be this, it does not show the impacts of a natural disaster. And from on D, of course, it's just showing something that is impossible. We're moving to a point that we cannot achieve, and yet again, it's not showing a shift in, therefore that would be A. So this is a really easy question, and had to get 5 out of 5 marks on that question 2. And let's keep going on to this question 3. So straight on to the question. The UK and hair beauty industry is an example of monopolistic competition because, and let's just have a read of the stimulus. According to the Royal Mail, more hair and beauty salons opened on UK high streets last year than any other type of independent business. Okay, with a net increase of 10%, representing 626 new salons. Now that is a good bit of real world application you can use in your essays if you are talking about a monopolistic competition. But now back to the question, why is the hair and beauty industry an example of monopolistic competition? Since firms spend nothing on advertising and research. That is not necessarily true, so we're going to say no for now for this one. Let's go on to B. The industry is dominated by a few large firms. That is, of course, and we know that for certain, that is not true. Why? A few large firms would suggest something more like an oligopolistic market. Of course, monopolistic markets, a really good way to remember monopolistic competition is it's very similar, and I usually teach it as a realistic version of perfectly competitive markets. If you remember back to perfectly competitive markets, then it's many buyers and sellers, and monopolistic is essentially the same, where there's many buyers and sellers, therefore the market is not dominated by a few large firms. Let's move on to see. The products are homogeneous. This is also untrue. And this is exactly why I teach students monopolistic competition. A really easy way to remember it is it's a realistic version of perfectly competitive markets. Perfectly competitive markets, we say the goods are homogeneous, so all goods are the same. Is this realistic? No. Therefore, like I said, monopolistic is the realistic version. Therefore, in monopolistic competition, the goods are slightly differentiated. So that's a really good way to remember it. But now let's go to the last option, which is D. There are low barriers to entry and exit. That is true. And again, contrasting it with perfectly competitive markets, we say the theoretical concept of perfectly competitive markets, they have no barriers to entry and exit. But is that realistic? Of course, it's not. Therefore, the realistic version of that, which is monopolistic competition, is that there's very low barriers to entry and exit. But yeah, that's a good way to remember that. But let's keep going. And we have another diagram question. We've been blessed again. So now, draw a cost and revenue diagram to show the long-run equilibrium of a firm in monopolistic competition. Now, what does it mean by long-run equilibrium? All this, of course, means is to do with the profits, and it essentially is when a monopolistically competitive firm will make no supernormal profits, it will only make normal profits. So now let's show that on the diagram. So let's get started. Cost/revenue on our axes, output, quantity, whatever you want to label on your x-axis, and just, of course, simple, whatever you want to call it, monopoly cost-revenue diagram. So D equals AR, and essentially the main rule that you just need to follow here with regards to the long run equilibrium is the main thing is that your AC curve just hits your AR curve. So that's probably a very bad representation of it. Something like that will do. So just moving the D equals AR further in so it looks a bit better. But yeah, so and then just make sure your MC curve, of course, still intersects AC at its lowest point. MC, and now what is the last thing we need to add on here? Just add on the profit maximization point. Where is profit maximization? Of course, where MC equals MR. Where's this point here? What do we do from there? We keep going until we hit our AR curve. Then we go left, and now label up the quantities. That's Q max, that is P max. But now where are our costs? Of course, we go up from Q max to find our costs, and now our costs are exactly the same as P max price. Therefore, what does that mean? It means we are only making normal profit and we are making no supernormal profit. And yeah, that is how to get 4 marks there, and that's a very easy another question. So 5 out of 5 there. And let's keep going here to this next question. So we have multiple choice. So the most likely reason for this demerger. So we're talking about a demerger. Let's have a read of the stimulus. In 2016, the insurance group eSure undertook a demerger with its GoCompare price comparison site website. Just asking for reasons for demergers. Why do firms demerge? It's usually to focus on their own business objectives. And because, for example, when PayPal and eBay demerged, I believe it's 2015. Why did they do that? Because they wanted to they wanted to become separate entities. So PayPal can, of course, focus on like the finance side of things, and eBay can focus on like the shopping side of things. But yeah, let's try to find this in this multiple choice. So the most likely reason for this demerger was to benefit from external economy scale. That is the reason you would merge, so that is not true. Benefit from internal economy scale, of course, that's another reason why you would merge, not demerge. Focus on its core business, that is pretty much what I said earlier, so yes, that would probably be the answer here. And increases market share. Of course, let's think about it very simply. If you demerge, you will be losing market share, so that would be a reason to merge. But yeah, let's keep going now, and it's a 4-mark question, a 4-mark calculate question here. So you calculate, using the information provided, the total costs of GoCompare in 2016. Okay, let's see this information it's given us. Following the demerger, GoCompare announced in 2017 a profit of 17.5 million, up 21.5% from 2016. Total revenue in 2017 was 75.8 million, up 4.1% in 2016. So okay, so essentially what is assessing us on is here, it's firstly percentage changes, and then our knowledge of the formula of profits. So how do we calculate profits? Profits is, of course, total revenue minus total cost, and that's pretty much what the 4 marks are here for. So let's get started with the total revenue. And of course, the main thing is, of course, this is why it's a big 4-mark question. It's asking us in 2016, and it's giving us all the stats and figures from 2017. So let's start with the total revenue. So total revenue in 2017 was 75.8 million. And that is up 4.1% since 2016. So how am I going to work out the total revenue in 2016? So what I'm going to do is going to take 75.8 million, and I'm going to divide it by 104.1. Why am I dividing by 104.1? Since, of course, it's up 4.1%. So that means I've just taken 100% and added 4.1% to it. So I'm going to take 75.8 million, divided by 104.1%, and then times it by 100. So that should tell me now. That should tell me now what it was before it increased by 4.1%. So essentially what the value was in 2016. And that gives me 72.81. That is going to be my revenue in 2016. So 72, and this of course in millions, remember, 72.81, and that I'm going to put that pound sign, millions. So I've got my total revenue now. What do I need now? So we want to calculate the costs. So we have but now, of course, we have this part of the equation. We now need, what other part of the equation do we need? We need the profits, and let's see what's it told us with the profits. In 2017, the profits were of 70.5 million, which is up 21.5% since 2016. So essentially we're doing the same thing. So 17.5 million, we are now dividing it by 121.5% essentially, and then timing it by 100. So essentially now that is how to work out the profits in 2016. So let's put that into the calculator, and that is going to give us 14.40. and of course that is millions again. So now how would we work out the rest of this? Now it's just a bit, I won't even call it algebra since it's that simple, but we have 40.4 and we have 17.81, and then essentially we have x. So 72.81 take away x will give us 40.4. X is what our total costs are. So how would we work this out? Of course, what you can do is just do 72.81 take away 14.4, and that is going to give us 58.41, which is of course the value for x, but that is also the value for our total costs. So 58.41, and that is of course millions, so that is going to be my answer. So 58.4, put that millions, and yeah, that is how to get 4 marks there. It's actually, if you break down, a very, very simple and quite an easy question. It's just using a few different parts of the specs. Of course, your knowledge of the profits formula, then basically a few percentage changes. But yeah, quite an easy question and really easy, like a really good section here so far. Like you can save a lot of time so far in this section here. This is why practice is so key, where you can really have a great surplus of time moving out of section here. But yeah, let's go on to the last question in this section here. It's a 5-mark question. It's 2 mark here. So explain how resources are allocated in a free market economy. Let's have a read of the stimulus. Free market economics is being challenged. The arguments for and against are being increasingly discussed within many countries. So of course this last question is referencing a very small part of the spec, which is 1.1.6. But what is the free market economy? Of course, it's just where essentially you leave it to the market. So how are resources allocated? It depends on the interaction of supply and demand. It depends on the interaction of the price mechanism, essentially. And the main thing is there's no such very limited government intervention. And of course, when you learn about the price mechanism, you learn about the things like the functions of the price mechanism, the 3 functions we learned about, which is signaling, incentivizing, and rationing. You can go into more depth with them. But of course, there's only 2 marks here, so you don't need to mention them much. Okay, let's keep going on this multiple choice question. So which of the following statements are true? So Hayek believed that the government should subsidize inefficient firms. So who are the 2 in the spec in 1.1.6? Who are the 2 individuals that promoted the free market economy? Of course, they were Hayek, and the other one was Adam Smith. So would an individual that wants basically Hayek was he was opposed to the command economy and promoted the free market economy. Therefore, free market economy, we do not want government intervention. Therefore, this is untrue, as of course this is including the government. Let's see what B says. So Hayek was a key advocate of the command economy. So like I just said, he was extremely opposed to the command economy. Okay, moving on, Karl Marx. So what did Karl Marx promote? Of course, Karl Marx was one of the promoters of the command economy. So let's try to find a statement regarding that. So Karl Marx advocated allocating resources by the free market. That, of course, is free market economics, and he did not promote that. And now D, Karl Marx criticized the private ownership of factors of production. That is true. Why is that? Because I wanted more like central planning in the command economy. So yeah, that is, so the answer would be D there. And let's keep going to the last 2 marker on this section here. So Adam Smith described the benefits of specialization and division of labour. Explain one advantage to firms for using the division of labour when organising its production process. This is why you need to make sure you have a good grasp on a wide range of the spec. Since again, look how early on this is in the spec. Lots of students neglect it because they think, oh, this is really early knowledge I learned in year 12, but you can drop very silly marks in very easy places. And of course, you do not want to be dropping marks on specialisation and division of labour. Instead of you becoming a jack of all trades, if you just do one thing your entire day, like for example, you just make the dough of the bread, you're gonna become very quickly. You're gonna become quite skilled at that. If you're very skilled at that one certain thing, of course, you're gonna be fast at producing it. Therefore, the main thing is going to reduce a firm's costs. It's going to increase productivity for the firm, and yeah, that's how to get 2 marks there and 5 out of 5 marks on this section A. This, in my opinion, is the easiest section A of every single paper I've done, and I've quite literally done every single paper. So yeah, that is a really, really easy section A in my opinion. So it means that even if you are dropping marks, of course, solve the marks you're dropping. But the reason why I think it's so easy is that you can really save a lot of time on this section A due to it having 2 diagram questions in it. But yeah, let's keep going and let's now move on to section B.